My guest this week is Chris Farrell. Chris has over 3 decades of experience as a wildlife photographer, and he is most at home hovering above Australia's oceans at between 1,000 and 2,000 feet. Here he takes images of Australia's endangered southern right whale, as well as documenting Australia's coastline. His images are featured in a number of publications, and he has co-authored 3 books on Australian wildlife, including one on reptiles, one on mammals, and one on birds. G'day, Chris. Thanks for joining me today.
No worries, Pete. It's a pleasure.
Now, I know you've got a passion for the environment, in particular southern right whales, as well as birds like parrots and cockatoos. When did you first become interested in wildlife?
I think I probably as soon as I sort of opened my eyes and saw either the cat that we had, that which wasn't exactly a wild thing, but when I was young, I was very lucky that I had parents that were interested in wildlife and just birds and everything. So, you know, it just grew from when I saw documentaries, and and it was just something from that moment onwards. I was just always interested in wildlife.
Fantastic. And the photography, I know you're really keen in photography. When did you start taking that up?
Yeah, look, my brother, one of my brothers, my oldest brother, had a Olympus camera, and it was something I always wanted to aspire to get an Olympus camera or a camera from when I first saw his. So yeah, when I was 18 and started my apprenticeship in carpentry on $100 a week, which is pretty amazing that it didn't exist on $100 a week. But the first thing I was going to buy was a camera. So I did start taking pictures probably earlier with Instamatic cameras and what have you in the family, but family pics and very bad pictures of the cat, or very bad pictures of my birds in my bird aviary that I used to have breed parrots years ago. But yeah, my first SLR was when I was 18, which is I think an OM40. I think I started off with, or I think that's what I started off with. Yeah, that's right, OM40, and then I went to the OM1 and OM4, sorry, and then advanced to Canon down the track.
Yeah, and you're still using Canon now?
Yeah, still using Canon now. So I started in the old film days, and I used to photograph the tennis and the Australian Open, and fine tuning my skills on sport. But back in the days of yes, looking at the needle and trying to get the 2 lines in focus and in line, and then get the pictures, and yeah, photograph Grand Prix and all sorts of things in earlier days. But got to digital down the track.
Exactly. Now, I know you like taking pictures of whales, and I know you like doing a lot of aerial photography. How long you been doing the aerial stuff?
Yeah, well, the aerial started probably late 90s. I had seen, I think it was I think it would have been in the 80s, that my brother had a aerial of a southern right whale and a poster, and I sort of wanted to get that image. So I did go up in the odd plane in the 80s in the back of the Cessna, which I think I discovered then I wasn't too well without motion sickness tablets in the back of a plane. But I did take heaps of photographs of 100 ASA, and yes, they're all blurred because it was too slow. But that was the starting point back then, and then I did go up a series of times after that to look at the southern rights and photograph at Warrnambool. But I also went up in choppers off Coffs Harbour and photographed whales and various things. And I actually was very lucky from work to actually fly via helicopter to an inspection, and that was really the starting point that got me motivated to photograph the coastline of Victoria. So once you see the land from 5,000 feet, it's a different world, and that's excited me ever since.
Oh, well, that sounds fantastic. Now, with the whales, how do you know where to look? How do you know where to go? I mean, obviously, you know, a plane's got a certain range and you can only be up there for a certain amount of time. How do you know where to go?
Yeah, well, it's not just all aerials, so that's bit of knowledge, but also mainly sightings or my own work to look for the whales. So predominantly Warrnambool is what they call an aggregation area, where whales actually come to either calve or to mate. I've learnt that now over time, but
Yep.
so Warrnambool was the main place I went for the southern rights. But over time, I've learnt various other areas where to go. But a lot of it is not just about going up and pot luck. It's a lot of it is actually looking on the land myself, or if I'm have some kind friends that might tell me where they might have seen a whale or information I may have received. Sometimes, because I work full time, sometimes there's a report on a Wednesday, and there was one report at Bem River on a Wednesday, and I had to take pot luck that I was going to find them on a Saturday, which I did. And that is a bit of luck, but I've learned that now because in 2017, I think I photographed about 25 or more than 25 whales, southern rights. And in 2019, I saw 0. So I went up about 10 times and didn't find one. So, so it's not always a given that I'm going to find them. And at the required 500 metres up, they're a centimetre long. So seaweed looks like a whale sometimes. It's very difficult to find them. It can be very disheartening when you go up and don't find them, because I've had a very lucky period of time where I did find a lot of whales for a long time there, and always found them just about every time I went up, which is great. But then when you go up and you don't find them, it can be frustrating. However, it's still beautiful being up there, and it gets down to you've got to be sensible. I'm not a millionaire, so you've got to work out whether you really can afford to go up and spend sometimes $600 or go up for $200 or whatever. And sometimes I've turned around the plane. I've told the guy to turn around to because I'm not flying the plane either. I'm chartering. So yeah, I've actually got the guy to turn, and then got back to find out that if I'd gone another 10 minutes, I would have found the one at Apollo Bay. But again, you've got to work out, well, that was going to be another probably $300, and it's not $300 I really had spare in my pocket at the time. So yeah, you've got to still pay the rates and the food bills.
So you within 500 metres, you've got to stay above 500 metres. What are you taking pictures of? I know you're taking pictures for identification purposes. So what are you really trying to get in your images?
Yeah, so the southern right whales have got a distinctive pattern on their head, and that's created by what they call 𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗎𝗏s. They're not barnacles, they're 𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗎s. So they're actually living lice, and they come through the bare patches of skin on both the top of the southern rights and through the lips of the southern rights at times. So what happens? They create a fingerprint as such. So they're found with the southern rights, both the northern and the southern rights. They're identified by these the 𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗎𝗏 patterns on their head. So a vertical shot of the head would be sensational, but that's not always achievable. You need the head of the whale to be out of the water, really, to be perfect, but that's not always achievable. Sometimes if the water is crystal clear, which I have had on times, the whale could be under the water still, and at this day and age with our beautiful technology, you can actually get the pattern. But last year I had a whale that's head was just slightly under in shocking clarity and really hard to get an ID shot.
So who do you send your images to for the identification purposes?
So in Victoria, which is the Mandy Watson, who is the project leader of the of what they call SWIFT, which is 𝗙𝗹𝗵𝗆𝗆𝗆𝗆. You can go on the website, you can look at the southern right, you can log in, you get your own login, and then you can actually put your photographs in to that and say where you've seen it. GPS coordinates is great, and the time and the date, and they can actually then the DELP officers can actually contact you and get further higher resolution photographs. But initially it's just a web image, really, just so that they can see it is a southern right, because there is a distinction, because they get mixed up sometimes, but the southern rights don't have a dorsal, they're black. Humpbacks have usually got a dorsal fin, much thinner, much elongated, with the white pectorals normally, white long pectorals, whereas the southern rights are more angular, and they've got the 𝗀𝗏𝗏𝗎𝗏s on the head, which is very distinctive, and they come extremely close, whereas the humpbacks are generally out a bit further. Usually they do come in close off the cliffs, but southern rights have got a very good habit of coming in off one wave off the beach to mainly to protect, mainly to actually rest up after a long swim, and also to protect their calves. They usually use their bodies as buffers between them and the killer whales and sharks that attack the calves.
Okay, well, very interesting. Well, we might cut to your first song, and then we'll talk a bit more about your whale photography after the first song. So you've chosen "Goodbye Yellow Brick Road" by Elton John. Can you tell us a bit about why you picked this song?
I grew up with Elton John. My brother's a piano player, but I just love it.
Now, Chris, before we went to that song, we're talking about your aerial whale photography. What are some of the more memorable sightings you've had from the air?
Yeah, there's been a few actually. I was only speaking about one the other day where I was hoping to go up to see a new southern right whale that had come into Warrnambool from my friend Peter Reed. Had wanted to get up and have a look at this new whale and calf. And my pilot said there was no way we're going to go up because there was a horrendous storm coming. And I was at the market and down Port Fairy, and the only time I could really get up was about 3 o'clock on a winter's day. And I could see a bit of blue sky coming. So I said to the pilot, yeah, I reckon we can go. And he said, oh, yeah, there may be a window. So off we went, we took off. And as we took off, Warrnambool was in a big cloud of rain. So that was the end of that. So off we went to Port Fairy, which I photographed some amazing pictures of Port Fairy. Came back to Warrnambool when Warrnambool was clear. But because we were later in the day, we had I could see we had the sun behind the waves. So what was happening was we were a fair way out to sea, and it was a huge swell. So there was about an 8 metre swell at Port Fairy, and there was a bigger swell at Logan's Beach. So I was watching in excitement as I watched the mother and calf actually going up a wave. And in the plane, I was able to photograph a backlit wave, which was probably about 40 foot high, with a 60-foot whale with a calf on her back. So
Wow.
that was, to date, was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. And I captured it, which was incredible.
Spectacular. Yeah, it sounds beautiful. I know you've also seen blue whales and giant dolphin pods out there. Is that typical, or do you only see them every now and again?
Yeah, the blue whales is something I'm still trying to re-see and recapture. But that was back in 2006. I went out with a very good friend of mine, and we saw about 10 blue whales, 2 every 10 k's. And although the images aren't the best I've taken out of a plane, to see a blue whale was pretty amazing. Seeing the mouth doubling in size as it engulfed the big slicks of krill was something you'd never forget. Yeah, and then on top of that, I did see one with a colleague that I think you and I both know, 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪. We were actually in a plane off the New South Wales coast, and he was looking at one side and I was looking at the other side, and he said, over there, and I said, no, they won't be up there, it's too far out. And he goes, oh no, there's something over there, there's something really big. And when the pilot turned the plane, to my horror, I saw the big tail of this big blue whale dive. So that was all I saw, that blue whale.
Yeah.
But look, that is amazing. And the other thing I've seen with the big pods of dolphins, which isn't normal, and I've just been lucky to see a super pod of dolphins, probably about 5,000 dolphins over a kilometre, which was pretty amazing. The whole sea was alive with dolphins, which is incredible. But I have actually been very, very lucky to see that occurrence twice out of a boat as well in the same area. So there seems to be a very strong food source off Lawrence's Rocks, between Lawrence's Rocks and Cape Nelson. But mind you, that is a location that every year the blue whales are seen as well feeding, and humpbacks have been seen feeding. So it must be obviously a very enriched area for the whales to feed, and obviously the dolphins and the gannets and whatever else in that area.
And that's in Victoria, both of those locations?
Yeah, southwest Victoria. So probably about 4 hours from Melbourne and about an hour off the border of South Australia.
Wow, fantastic. Now, we were talking about lenses before, that you use a telephoto lens to take the pictures of the whales because you're so high up. What size lens are we talking?
Yeah, so I've experimented with all sorts of lenses out of the old planes, but more recently I was using a 150 to 600 Sigma lens out of a Cessna. And that's interesting. I've tried the 600 prime that I've now got, and it doesn't fit. But that's a minor technicality. It just doesn't quite fit. And the thing about aerials out of a plane, if you don't hang on to your lens very well, and with the window open, they won't really last in your hands. They'll be blown away. So, and that doesn't go very well with authorities. So you should never lose anything out of a plane. Just quietly, nothing should ever come up out of a plane. But yeah, you've got to really hang on to things. So I do run the big 600 or the 150 to 600 around the edge of the window. But more recently, I've actually used a 100 to 400, smaller lens, easy to hold on the edge of the plane. But I generally will hold it right on the rim of the window of the plane. And there's a lot of vibration, of course, so you've got to really up your shutter speed. But I'm shooting with a 1DX, which is the ISO doesn't come into it. It allows me to shoot very high shutter speeds, and I'm not, as I said before, I'm not going for pretty images. Aerials of the land out of a plane's a different story. 50mm lens. I sometimes use my shoulder to, if I'm shooting one direction, to block the wind and lean a little bit out. But generally, you shoot within the plane. You shouldn't shoot out the window of the plane. As I said, it's too strong, the wind forces. The big Sigma lens, as I said, I'm holding it on the edge of the window, but I've got the bulk of the lens in the plane. So I'm generally leaning back a long way, which means myself and the pilot become very friendly. But because there's not room in the Cessna, there's hardly any room in the Cessna I use. But that's the key. You cannot have the lens out the window. You just can't.
Yep. And do you have a set number of pilots you go up with, or is there, you just choose who's available at the time?
Yeah, well, the pilots are becoming a hard thing because drones have actually drones was the main use of pilots was to do a lot of real estate photography, and unfortunately they're no longer required to do it. So they're dropping their licenses off. So I'm limited to who I use, but generally we'll use instructors. That's my main choice of pilots. Is if they're instructors, I usually use people that are highly experienced, because with the window open, there's a lot of forces on the plane. So and generally whale season, it's not very kind, the weather. It's usually very windy. And yes, I was recently last season, we nearly ended up in Antarctica. I think we were looking like we were going blown. The plane was being blown on a 45-degree angle, and the pilot, who is an instructor, I sort of joked and said to him, "Why have you got the plane at 45 degrees?" And he said, "Well, Chris, the wind's a bit strong." I said, "Yeah, I thought that might be the case." And then we dropped about 20 feet, and I just thought, well, that's it. We're going home. I'm not going to put up with any more of that. So I won't risk it either, but I need a very, very experienced pilot.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then you need to get the angle you need to get the picture you need, but also someone who can actually still fly the plane while you do what you're doing.
Yeah, like the pilot I use, usually a 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃, he's an absolute gun. And he has a plane on a 45-degree angle, which is interesting on your head anyway. It doesn't matter how well you take your motion sickness tablets, you can still feel it.
I bet. And how much of the coastline have you photographed?
I try to keep the Victorian coastline current as much as I can. Presently, I've got the whole Victoria coastline up to 2018. I think I'm pretty well relevant to most of it. Yep. But I like to keep it current. I'm due to do a 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃 flight, but due to COVID, I haven't been down there yet. But I do want to do a 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃 flight to just probably just a comparison flight of, unfortunately, the devastation. Just more to help people in regard to what's there and in the comparison of what I've got previously.
Yeah, because 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃 got very heavily affected by the fires. So yeah.
Yeah, around the corner into New South Wales towards Green Cape is what I really want to see, because it's pretty much wilderness area there. So that was one of the most picturesque locations I've seen on the Australian coastline. I've seen to Queensland and what have you, but that's pretty picturesque, pretty amazing location. So that's where I saw the blue whale off that location. So yeah, I'd like to have a look up towards Eden and just see where that's at. But the thing about those aerials too, to touch on, is that I don't do them from Melbourne. I drive to airports, so I'll drive to 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃 airport, then catch a flight and go up. It's too expensive to do it any other way for me. That's the way I prefer, but it's a long drive to 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃 as well. So yeah, unfortunately through COVID this year, it's been a bit difficult to do those sorts of trips, but I'll do them again next year, hopefully, or this year, if everything settles down a bit more. It'd be good.
Yeah, no, I hope you do. Okay, we're going to listen to your second song now, which is We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel. What's the story behind this one, Chris?
Yeah, again, I grew up with Billy Joel and Elton John, and I like to fire up and like to get myself energy going, and it's one of those ones that fires me up.
We've been talking about your aerial photography, but I want to jump back to terra firma, and I know you take a lot of pictures of birds. You post a fair few online. But you have a special interest in parrots and cockatoos. Why that group in particular?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I always, I went to a person's backyard and I saw an aviary full of budgies. So convinced my parents that I wanted to build bird aviaries in the backyard and have some budgies. So budgies and cockatiels, and Yeah, just having them as pets, it was pretty quick to work it out that they actually have got a very strong intelligence. And the cockatiels used to even watch me build a new aviary, and it was fascinating to have these pets that seem to be very intelligent and seem to be very interested in what you're doing. So parrots are something that I've always liked in the wild as well. And I did have a fascination. I still have a fascination for birds of prey. But over time, there's a lot of rare parrots, and I've really, it's something that I really like to photograph and look for, and I'll photograph the same parrot over and over again. Certain parrots, eastern rosellas are a very endearing parrot that's actually local here in Mentone, and through COVID, when the restrictions were high and I couldn't take photographs, it was deemed in Melbourne that photography was recreational, and therefore you weren't allowed to do it technically.
Right.
So to have a beautiful eastern rosella sitting on the side fence, and to have my big 600mm prime fillet full frame was a pretty amazing experience. So that was great in itself. But I do like to go out and help with surveys. I've been doing the survey for around at least close to 2 decades of the red tails in the west of Victoria.
Oh,
Just trying to
the
do it.
red-tailed black cockatoos, yeah.
Yeah, the red tail black. So I've been trying to do help with that, but I do help a little bit with the swift parrot these days as well, if I can, if we can find a time. And it's great to get connections with bird life, and if you find a sighting of a swift parrot or whatever, and notified bird life. 𝗙𝗹𝗹𝗪𝗀 is the man who looks after the swift parrots, so I send him an email and tell him that I've seen so many or photographed so many, and happy to tell other people where to report the sightings, which is always hard because a lot of people are just interested in actually ticking them. But it's really important that these endangered species are actually recorded, but also that they can go their own way and feed, because they're coming over to our shores. The swift in particular comes from Tassie, and then it has to go back. So it usually migrates right up to Queensland and then travels back to Tassie to breed. Like it's the orange-bellied parrot, which is really it's struggling, but looks like there's good signs that they're breeding. They've bred well in captivity and been reintroduced. So this year's looking very good as well. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm talking about parrots again. I know you're heavily involved in the local avicultural society.
Yeah, so I haven't bred birds for probably 30 years, I'd say now. But a friend of mine convinced me to sell my images at an avicultural sale back in 2011. And I started selling my pictures at the club, but I thought I'd do the right thing and be the right thing to do. You should join, just not just sell your images at their sales.
Yep.
And then there's a lot of people there that love birds in the wild, and built up an incredible network of wonderful people that had they had the love of keeping them and breeding them, and also two, they had a phenomenal knowledge. To be a good aviculturalist, you really do need to know how they breed in the wild and how they feed and what they need. So I've been involved with the club since 2011, and I wanted to be more active with the club, so I've actually become a committee member, and I'm now the organizer, the program coordinator, and now I'm actually the co-vice president of Australian Agricultural Society of Australia, which is pretty amazing to be, because there's some pretty amazing people involved. But I'm very strong in conservation, but you also got to do what the members like, so that's all good. But just an array of amazing people.
Yeah, yeah. No, it sounds very interesting. You spoke about conservation before. I know you support local charities or Australian charities. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, look, so the Woolworth Fund for Nature was one I mentioned earlier. So when I went out of agriculture, and because I couldn't actually put the energy and the time into the welfare of the birds like they needed, I decided to spend that money on donating to the Woolworth Fund for Nature in particular. They actually are a group that work on a lot of laws to safeguard our habitats. So they work on the overall habitat of a bird, so or a mammal or what have you. So no use working on the actual individual if you can't keep the environment that they live in. So they work on a number of programs, and that's why I'm very interested in them. BirdLife is another one. I got involved in BirdLife when I was helping a friend of mine, Shane Howard, um, to to actually help save the hooded plovers and the Belfast Coastal Reserve. And through that, I gained a great connection with BirdLife, and now I've got some interesting, very good people with BirdLife. The red-tails I do the count for them, and whatever I can do to help, I will do. I'm also Wildlife Victoria, which are the carers for the injured animals as well. And last year with the bushfires, I directly gave money to carers. I knew the carers would be doing it hard, and I knew they needed the money straight away. And it was money I'd made at a market, so I'm happy to give that money to them as well. So as long as the money goes directly to activities I believe will help the environment, I will donate that money. So they're the groups I've given to so far. There's a couple others I've given to. Greening Australia, I've given money to. They were doing work on the red-tails as well in the west of the state as well, but the west of Victoria. So yeah.
And most of this is coming from images you're selling at the markets, you're saying. So if anyone's going to the markets, if they're allowed to go to the markets again now, they should come and find you and help support local wildlife carers and conservation groups. Okay, we're going to listen to your third song now, which is the John Dunbar theme from Dances with Wolves. Can you tell us why you picked this one?
One of my favourite movies of all time. The theme itself is wonderful, and love the music, but also too just the story behind Dances with Wolves. The fact that the Indians had that beautiful harmony with wildlife and with nature, and how that the coming of the soldiers and the coming of the people would mean the end of their way of life.
We spoke a bit earlier about your lenses that you use for aerial photography, but what about the bird photography? What are your go-to lenses for that?
Yeah, bird photography is interesting because I did start with small lenses like 70 to 200, which really was too small for most bird photography. But look, the Sigma, I love the Sigma, the 150 to 600 mil. It gives a very large range, and it's got a good focusing distance of 2.5 meters. However, more recently, I have managed to invest in a 600 mil prime lens, which is a magnificent lens. However, it's fixed. So the 100 to 400 Mark II Canon is pretty much known as being one of the best lenses for wildlife photography, especially bird photography.
Okay.
And it's also got a very good minimum focus distance of 1.2 meters, which is wonderful because you can have your 600 mil lens and it's 4.5 meters minimum focus, and it doesn't really help when an emu wren lands at 2 meters because you can't take a picture of it.
Right. Okay. And obviously, you're saying investing in this equipment, it can get very expensive. What do you suggest for people that might be just starting out with bird photography, particularly, or wildlife photography in general?
Maybe go out and hire, if you want to hire a prime lens, and just have a go, or hire a 100 to 400. There is a lot of places in Melbourne and probably in other capital cities that allow you to hire some really good camera gear that gives you the opportunity to have a look and see what you can get from those images instead of investing a lot of money into finding out something doesn't suit you. One of the problems with a lot of the lenses, especially the Sigma, especially the 150 to 600, it isn't light, and there is a lot of people out there with a lot of people getting into bird photography now at an older age, or they might have injuries or what have you, and it isn't a light lens to hold. So it gives the person the chance to see what these lenses and these cameras are like. The 𝗏, which I use, is not a light camera either. A 100 to 400 and a decent camera, a decent camera with has capable of shooting RAW, and it's something up to about 20 megapixels, and then you can hire those and just have a play.
Okay. And you're talking about the weight of the camera. Do you handhold a lot, or is it tripod? Or
Yeah, birds don't really cater for tripods and monopods at times. So a lot of the time I hand hold, but I hand hold on an object. So if it's not me on me hands and knees and me elbows, it may be on a tree. So I use the trees a lot. I'll try to creep up and then rest the lens on a tree or a stump or something. Always looking for bull ants and snakes, which is always a good thing to be mindful of.
Of course, yeah, yeah. And that sort of probably leads into what I was going to ask you next. Is there things that people got to be mindful of when they're out taking pictures of birds?
Well, number one thing you got to be mindful of is the birds themselves. Yeah, I find that there's the old creep and creep approach where you start off, you take a picture no matter where the bird is, and then you just slowly move towards it very quietly. I try to use objects to block their vision. So if there's a tree or if there's sometimes conveniently like a big water tank, I would put the water tank between myself and the bird and actually, or animal, if it doesn't always have to be birds. And I try to creep up slowly. But yes, you've got to be very mindful of your feet. Now, there is several things that could be on under your feet. There's called rabbit holes, and that's actually also interesting because if you put your foot down there, you can break your ankle. And also you might disturb the birds. But you also, there's things called snakes that you've got to be careful of as well. So we're very mindful in the summer of what's below your feet. And I'm also very mindful of bull ants. So
Okay.
I don't like them running up my leg when I'm taking pictures. If there's a bull ant, if there's a bird, I still don't step in the bull ant mound. I always make sure I move.
I'll bet you do.
I flicked one off in the car the other day. I was driving the car and one ended up on my arm and I flicked it and I thought, hang on, what was that? Was that a spider? Was that a bull ant? It was a bull ant. And I luckily removed it from the car when it came up the windscreen.
Now, people who are getting into photography, they're getting some good images, whatever. How can they promote their images?
There's a lot of forums these days. We're very lucky these days, not like in the past. So, yeah, there's different Facebook pages you can go on. You go onto Instagram. You can go onto various bird pages. There's a lot of various bird pages. But I'm actually started a couple of little groups myself, a parrot group and a cockatoo group. And most people are welcome to join the parrot and cockatoo. Amazing parrots and cockatoos. There's no one's will rip your images apart. They'll just I usually like everything that comes up and give a little bit of feedback and thank people for sharing. There are a lot of pages out there that might be a bit fussy and they might be a bit harsh with people. So you just got to be mindful of just look around and have a bit of a play. But Facebook is pretty good. There's a number of birding pages. If you're concerned about the photo ID of a bird, you can always ask Peter, of course, because he's got a good knowledge. But you can go on the bird identification page. There's a waders and shorers page. There's my parrot page, but there's other parrot pages. There's Vic Birders, which is in Victoria. There's Victoria Birders Travelling. There's a birding page, I think, for every state now. And
Okay.
so there's a lot of options to put them out there. But you've just got to have a look and see what group is probably best suits you. But you can also join your local camera club as well and do competitions. And generally those people will all give good feedback to your images as well.
Excellent. Oh, very good. Do you enter any of your things in competitions?
I do, and I have luckily to come second runner-up with one of my landscape images of hooded plovers on the beach. But yes, there's one the end of this week that I think you might have entered as well in the past, and I probably will venture to put a couple of images in there. So it's always interesting. But for a long time, I didn't enter any images. So I didn't really enter competitions, and I really don't do camera clubs. But it's not because I don't want to enter competitions with those. I just don't have a lot of time in my normal days. So yeah, I haven't gone down that path. It's a very good path to go down. I've seen some people develop their skills via camera clubs, and they haven't gone backwards with their images. They've gone forward, and they've got incredible photos. I definitely want to do some more post-production courses myself. So
Talking about post-production, what software do you use to do your images?
So yeah, I use Lightroom, and I got shown Lightroom by a colleague a friend of mine that I actually idolised when I was a kid, and through him I was lucky to meet some nice people. I think Peter Rowland, I think, might be one of the people I met. But Lightroom is what I use. So I like it because it's less complicated. So I actually can do an edit. I can copy the edit and then keep on copying the edit across. But I did learn from Steve about the histogram in the back of the camera. So when I generally take my images, I try to have it doesn't have to have a perfect curve, but as long as I can see I haven't wiped out the highlights and haven't lost all the shadow material, I can actually still recover work in that area. There is other areas you can use. You can use Photoshop and a few other areas, but I prefer to use Lightroom. It's a quick and easy way.
And we're talking about Steve Parrish there, you mentioned, but that's the importance of using shooting in RAW, isn't it? If you're not shooting in RAW, you don't have the opportunity to really take back those lost shadows or blown out highlights.
Yeah, well, Steve was adamant that RAW was it when I first met Steve. I had no idea what he's talking about. But RAW, he did explain it's like a palette of paint, and you've got all the paints on the palette. You can always change it. And I do tell people that as well. So the JPEG literally is a compressed image, which is an average of the colours that the camera believes you've taken. And sometimes is not true to what you actually photographed. So the RAW, as you said, you've got all the data there, so you can actually change that data in either Photoshop or Lightroom or other methods. But the most important thing to understand with Lightroom is you never affect the original image. So you've always got that up your sleeve, so you can always go back later on and do some work on that image, or you can always have that image available. And it's very important if your computer crashes or your hard drive crashes, because you've never lost those images.
Okay, and that's the RAW file you're talking about.
Yeah, it's the RAW file. And the other thing too, which I didn't mention and which we should mention too, is we should always have the bank. So we have you load your images. You should always load your images in a vault, as they call it. You put your images in the vault first, and then you put your images again into another hard drive, so you can actually work with those images. But you should always have your vault and your backup vault, so that if anything ever happens, you've got your images are all safe.
Okay, yeah, of course, and you know, nowadays with digital format, people are shooting more and more images, so it's not surprising to have someone with 100 or 200,000 images that they might have taken over a period of time, that if their hard drive crashes on their main computer and they haven't backed it up for some reason, well, that's a lot of images lost.
Yes, when I used film, I used rolls of 36, and now I'm using I have done a couple of times where I've shot 3,500 photographs in a day. So it's amazing with a drive that goes at 12 frames a second how many photographs you do take. However, I must say, in aerials, I think I'm averaging probably 100 shots when I do aerials these days. So I'm not shooting as much when I do aerial photography of the land. I will of the whales because I'm trying to get a shot, but and I'm using the motor drive. So it's a different situation when you're taking your time to take an image as well.
Of course, yeah. Okay, we're going to listen to your fourth song, which I know has got a very special place with you. So Solid Rock by Goanna. Can you tell us about this song?
Well, yeah, I liked it when I first heard it, and I really didn't know much about it, I must admit, at the time. But I have become very good friends with the man that wrote this song, and Shane Howard, and he's an amazing environmental warrior and human rights warrior. It speaks volumes of the person and volumes of what we have done. So very, very respectful of Shane and very respectful of this great song.
Okay, yeah, definitely a very powerful message in that song, Solid Rock by Goanna, and Shane Howard, of course, very, very passionate advocate for the environment and for the people of the land. Okay, Chris, I'd like to chat about your books. I know we've written a few books together. Has this always been a passion of yours?
Well, that's something I really didn't quite see coming, Peter. But lucky for me, I met a lovely person called Peter Rowland, actually, not the caterer, but yourself, when I did a masterclass with Steve Parrish. And Steve and I had become very good friends at that stage. So he told me there was a guy coming that had written books, and pretty impressed by him. So, yeah, so we met at that particular time at that masterclass, but we had a really good time. And yeah, we did speak and we talked about it, but I thought I was just doing photography, but you had different ideas with me. So you encouraged me to do something which has always been what I would call a battle for me, but I have thoroughly enjoyed it. And the book that was most enjoyable, I would say, out of the three, was really the bird book, because we both could see there was a hole in the market, I suppose you could say, and also to many a time I've tried to time my light to go to reserves to take photographs, and only to find that I couldn't find the gate or find my way in. So yeah, so it was really good to actually work on a book that gave a GPS coordinates, or it really gave people a guide to getting to the best places in a lot of interesting locations to see a lot of birds, and also well facilitated locations. So that was really interesting. It was also interesting going to places and going to places I hadn't really seen, and also to yes, I love my parrots, and yes, I love birds of prey, but I didn't really pay attention much more than the wren. So I learn a lot birds, more birds than I had previously really considered, and that was through yourself. So I really thank you for that, and thank you for helping me get involved in books. And yeah, I'm intrigued to do further books.
Yeah, well, we're carrying on, aren't we? We've got a couple of regional bird guides on the go at the moment, so hopefully we'll get those out soon as well. Now that COVID restrictions are easing again, are you keen to travel? Are you able to travel?
Yeah, I've already got out and about so far. So I did get out through COVID though. I did. We had a little bit of a break at one stage there, which was nice. And I did get up in a plane, which I and photographed one of two mothers and calves. Well, she's three mothers and calves. There wasn't a Victorian coastline, but I did manage to photograph one for photo ID, which is nice. So was able to get out once. And then since then, there's been little trips. We were, through COVID in Melbourne, we were able to go 5 kilometres, which is not very far, but that still allowed me to get to a local reserve, Braeside Park. However, I have got a love for the Mallee, and a love for the southwest of Victoria, and a love for the northeast of Victoria. I have really been to the southwest much this year, but or late last year when we could get out. But I have been to the Mallee a few times, and it's been very enlightening. So it was very nice up there the other day.
Yeah, you've just been up there, haven't you? Yeah.
Yeah, very comfortable, 45 degrees in the shade, and it was probably about 60 when I was sitting at the waterhole photographing birds. But it was interesting. Yeah, it was interesting to get some amazing images of mulga parrots and Mallee ringnecks and blue bonnets amongst bronze-winged pigeons and peaceful doves and crested pigeons and wood swallows.
When you go up on these trips, I'm sort of curious. I know a lot of people would go up and target one particular species, or a couple of different species. Do you drive, because it's quite a way from where you are up to the Mallee region of northwestern Victoria there? Do you go with one particular thing in mind, or is it just a trip and you hope to see what you can get?
Yeah, I actually do like certain things. Parrots is what I like, but no, I actually I did have a couple of birds that I would have liked to have seen, but it wasn't to be. The weather was too hot when I went last time, and then I work full time, so I was restricted on when I was really going to go. So I went that particular time, but I didn't know that due to the weather being so warm, I was probably going to see a lot of parrots at the waterhole. So I do still like to see behaviour of certain birds, and I wanted to get birds with reflections, and I did get some amazing photographs.
Okay, we're going to play your last song now, "Candle in the Wind" by Elton John. Why did you pick this one, Chris?
Yeah, Candle in the Wind, Elton John's lyrics about Marilyn Monroe, how he didn't know her when she was a kid, but the candle burned out well before the ledger never will. They mean a lot to our species. We've the paradise parrot. I've never saw it and never will see it because it's extinct. And we're hoping that a lot of the species that we've still got today, they don't go extinct. So our generations in front of us or behind us, if you want to call it, kids of the future, have the luxury of being able to see these birds and not actually or animals, I should say, species that we see that aren't extinct. So hopefully their candle hasn't burnt out and they aren't looking at them only in books or videos. That's why it means so much.
Candle in the Wind by Elton John. Chris, just in summing up, I know you're working on a couple of books with me at the moment. I know you're planning a few trips to try and get some more pictures now that the COVID restrictions have eased a bit. But what other things are on your radar?
Yeah, well, writing books was never in my goals. Actually, I have had goals all my life. Even though I struggled as a kid, I always struggled through my education or what have you. I've always, in more later life, I did set a number of goals and I've achieved them all. So my latest goal is something that was always been burning in me. I've been looking at real estate pretty much all over my working life. And I did look at a lot of properties that I wanted to buy to try to conserve them and save them, but I could never afford those properties that I wanted to do that with. But I set myself a goal that I want to buy 4 corners or 4 properties in Victoria, all 4 corners of Victoria. One, the southeast is to probably protect the wildlife in there. There's various birds down there. The glossy blacks are down that way towards 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃 and Marlow. The northeast is one of the areas I'm also very attracted to. There's the superb parrot and there's the 𝘄𝗏𝗃𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, which are doing well, the 𝘄𝗏𝗃𝗀𝗀𝗀s, but I still would like to do something in that area. And then the northwest, which is the mallee, and the southwest, which is the red-tailed black cockatoo. So I'm lucky enough to look like the northeast is going to be my starting point. And I've got something in the northwest, which I'm also looking at as well. So the northeast is looking very highly likely to be my first little venture, but I want to do a chain of ecotourism properties where people can be educated with the environment and also stay and enjoy the environment. So I'm hoping the northeast will be the first one, and it is looking very close.
Definitely a focus on conservation well into the future. You're doing some fantastic work with the whale photography and identification and mapping of the species, and doing wonderful work in the future of conservation of wildlife in your state. So I wish you really well.
Thank you very much. We'll see how we go, but everyone can do a little bit. It can be just putting a nest box up for the birds or the possums. We can all do a little bit. Every little bit that we do will help.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Chris. I appreciate you taking time out this evening to have a chat. And yeah, it's been wonderful catching up and hearing what you're up to at the moment.
No worries. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, Peter.